Found a journal from a 2,000-year-old vampire. What I discovered sent chills down my spine. Keep watching if you are brave enough. The air in my inherited study always felt thick with unspoken histories. A scent of aged paper and forgotten lives clinging to the dust motes dancing in the meager afternoon light. It was a quiet, almost isolated corner of the old house, far from the city's ceaseless hum, a place where the only sounds were the creak of settling timbers and the rustle of leaves outside the tall, arched windows. I had been cataloging my grandaunt's eclectic collection of antiquities, task both tedious and oddly comforting, when my fingers brushed against something loose behind a forgotten bookshelf. A hidden compartment, concealed by a cleverly carved panel, revealed itself. My heart gave a curious thump, a mix of intellectual curiosity and a nascent, unidentifiable dread. This was more than just an antique. It felt fated, almost as if it had been waiting for me. The authenticity and immediacy of the moment were palpable, grounding me in the present, yet hinting at a past about to intrude. Inside, nestled in darkness, lay a journal. It wasn't merely old. It was ancient. The worn leather cover, darkened with centuries of handling, felt strangely warm beneath my fingertips. Its texture like scarred skin. The pages, brittle and yellowed, seemed to sigh as I carefully opened it. A strange, faint scent, metallic and earthy, like old blood mixed with damp soil, emanated from within, prickling the hairs on my arms. The script was unlike anything I had ever seen. Beautiful, yet unsettling. Tangle of faded symbols and elegant foreign characters. It exuded an unsettling aura, a silent promise of secrets best left undisturbed. My mind, ever the rationalist, tried to dismiss the growing unease as the thrill of a rare find, a trick of the imagination. But the object itself, in its very physicality, seemed to whisper warnings, a subtle foreshadowing of the horrors it contained. I found myself drawn to it, compelled to understand its secrets. The intimacy of holding such an ancient, personal artifact was profound, almost a direct connection to a long-dead soul. Yet a chilling thought began to form. What if this connection was not merely historical, but something far more insidious? The very act of discovery, of unearthing this forbidden knowledge, felt like stepping into a trap. The narrative of found-footage horror, where the discoverer often meets a grim fate, played at the edges of my consciousness. My curiosity, once a benign academic pursuit, now felt like a dangerous indulgence. It's a self-inflicted wound that would slowly, inexorably, lead to my undoing. Whispers from antiquity. The ancient horror unveiled days blurred into nights as I became consumed by the journal. Deciphering the ancient script was a painstaking process, a slow unveiling of fragmented accounts and strange, unsettling symbols. Each translated phrase was a piece of a macabre puzzle, building anticipation with every revelation. The earliest entries hinted at a terrifying existence rooted in ancient Rome, a time around 2 millennia ago. The writer, an unknown chronicler, detailed a pervasive fear among the populace, not of gods or emperors, but of something far more primal. They spoke of Lemures, malevolent spirits of the dead, believed to haunt the living, especially those who died without proper burial rites. These accounts resonated with older Mesopotamian tales of the Akimu, vengeful souls that drained life force and spread sickness. The journal suggested that the entity it described preyed upon these very fears, exploiting the high infant mortality rates and the harsh realities of life for the poor in that brutal era. The vampire, as depicted in these initial pages, was no romantic figure. It was a grotesque, reanimated corpse, driven by pure malice, a stark contrast to the alluring creatures of modern fiction. The descriptions were visceral, a thing of elongated fingers and fangs, little more than half-rotted corpses, perpetually filthy from its grave. Its methods were brutal and direct. Suffocation by pressing on the chest, draining life force or consuming flesh. There was no beauty, no charm, only a raw, bestial hunger. This subversion of familiar vampire tropes was deeply unsettling. It shattered any preconceived notions, making the entity far more terrifying and unpredictable. The historical context wasn't just background. It was the very soil in which this horror took root, feeding on the specific anxieties of each age. As I delved deeper, my initial curiosity gave way to a profound, chilling dread. The words on the page seemed to seep into my very being, manifesting as a racing heart and shallow, ragged breaths. Sleep became a battleground, plagued by unsettling dreams and vivid nightmares that mirrored the journal's horrors. I found myself hypervigilant. Every creak of the house, every distant sound, amplified and interpreted through the lens of ancient malevolence. The journal was not merely a historical record, it was a contagion, transmitting its dread across millennia. My mind, once a sanctuary, was becoming a new setting for the horror, slowly deteriorating under the relentless assault of its contents. The act of reading was no longer a choice. It was a compulsion, a descent into a psychological torment from which there seemed no escape. Echoes through eras. A chronicle of predation, the journal continued, a chilling chronicle of predation through the ages. Each entry, a testament to the vampire's enduring brutality and chilling adaptability. It was a mirror reflecting humanity's darkest periods, the creature thriving in the shadow of collective suffering. During the medieval period, roughly from 1000 to 1485 CE, the entries became particularly grim. The vampire, devoid of any redeeming qualities, was described as a high-functioning sociopath, its human mask slipping only when it moved in for the kill. It reveled in senseless violence for the sake of their own enjoyment. The Black Death, which decimated up to 50% of Europe's population in the 14th century, was a feast for it. The journal hinted at how the vampire exploited the widespread fear, the sheer volume of dead bodies, and the desperation caused by famine, blending seamlessly into the chaos, often perceived as a demon in disguise, or a manifestation of the devil himself. Its logic was unpredictable, its morality alien, making it impossible for any human to truly grasp or predict its next move. The Renaissance. From approximately 1485 to 1714 CE, saw the vampire adapt to a world slowly emerging from feudalism, yet still rife with natural disasters, epidemics, warfare, and religious turmoil. The entry spoke of it preying on the urban poor and overcrowded, unsanitary towns where disease and malnutrition were rampant. It was a creature that understood the vulnerabilities inherent in human society, exploiting them with cold, calculating precision. Then came the Industrial Revolution. Spanning from about 1760 to 1970 CE, the journal detailed how the vampire thrived in the squalor of the burgeoning industrial cities, a landscape of smoke and steam. It preyed on the malnourished factory workers, their bodies weakened by poor nutrition and dangerous workplaces. Children, often left to fend for themselves or forced into grueling labor, were particularly vulnerable victims. The vampire blended into the anonymity of dense populations, its ancient methods of suffocation evolving to exploit the relentless hum of machinery and the pervasive stench of open sewers. It was a predator perfectly adapted to the new horrors born of human progress. The early 20th century, from 1901 to 1939 CE, saw the vampire persist amidst the anxieties of global conflicts and societal upheaval. The journal hinted at its ability to navigate new technologies, its predation continuing amidst the chaos of world wars, a dark reflection of modern society's own capacity for horror. Across all these eras, the journal reinforced the vampire's core nature, a cold, calculating, functioning sociopath with no redeeming qualities. It wore a human mask to blend in, only revealing the beast wearing the skin of a human. When it was time to feed, the cumulative horror of these millennia of predation intensified my mental distress. The sleep disturbances became more severe, the nightmares more vivid and intrusive. Bleeding into my waking hours, hypervigilance became a constant, exhausting state. Every creak, every shadow, every distant sound was now interpreted through the lens of the journal's horrors. I began to question my own sanity. Was the journal merely revealing a hidden truth, or was it actively causing these changes, a psychological weapon designed to break its reader? The more I read, the more I felt trapped, my mind becoming the very stage for its continuing malevolence. The sustained exposure to such profound evil was slowly, irrevocably unraveling me. The unraveling mind, descent into madness. The journal's final, most recent entries were the most disturbing. They were less chronicles and more intimate confessions. Chilling glimpses into the vampire's unpredictable logic and its delight in toying with others for fun. The human mask it wore for centuries seemed to slip more frequently, revealing the true beast wearing the skin of a human beneath. It spoke of its ancient origins, its unique powers beyond typical lore creature, that did not always fear daylight, possessing hypnotic abilities and feeding on psychic energy as much as blood. It was a cold, calculating entity, a high-functioning sociopath making very few mistakes. The sheer malevolence, described with such detached precision, made my own reality feel increasingly fragile. My mental state began a pronounced, terrifying deterioration. My perspective became subjective, unreliable, blurring the lines between the journal's reality and my own. I found myself misinterpreting events, seeing fleeting shadows that weren't there, struggling to articulate coherent thoughts. Physical manifestations of extreme stress emerged, a constant tremor in my hands, eyes darting nervously, a perpetual need to check over my shoulder. My hygiene suffered, my surroundings became neglected, mirroring the decay within. The world around me warped. Sounds were amplified, distorted, a distant siren becoming a mournful wail, the wind outside a sinister whisper. Shadows stretched and writhed, familiar objects in my study taking on sinister forms. My mind, once a fortress, was now a crumbling ruin, the setting for an inescapable horror. This internal landscape, ravaged by fear, became the ultimate horror. The less I could trust my own senses, the more terrifying the implied threat became, forcing my imagination to fill in the terrifying blanks. My thoughts became an obsessive internal monologue, dominated by the journal's contents. I replayed horrifying passages, desperately seeking patterns, a way to understand or escape the entity it described. The I became pervasive, a reflection of my isolation in this self-inflicted terror. The journal, I realized with a chilling certainty, was not just a record, it was a weapon. Its very existence, spanning millennia, was a deliberate act, curated to break the mind of anyone who found it. The vampire, a distant, unseen character, had already won, corrupting my sanity without a single physical confrontation.
Oh.
The present haunting, the unending nightmare, the final entries of the journal were scrawled, fragmented, almost frantic. They were no longer historical accounts, but a terrifying shift to the immediate present. They hinted at the vampire's current location, its awareness of being discovered, or perhaps its impending arrival. The air thins. One passage read, "When I am near." The pulse quickens. They know. They always know. Another, barely legible, seemed addressed directly to me. "You have sought me. You have found me." The shift from historical dread to a present, palpable threat was a knife twisting in my gut. There was no grand confrontation, no dramatic reveal, only a powerful, insidious suggestion of its presence. A subtle sound, a whisper that wasn't the wind. A faint creak from the floorboards above that wasn't the old house settling. Then, a sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature, a cold dread seeping into the room, raising goosebumps on my arms. I felt an unseen gaze upon me, heavy and ancient, pressing down with the weight of 2,000 years of malice. My already shattered mental state amplified every sensation, every shadow, making it impossible to discern reality from the terrifying delusions that now consumed me. The horror was amplified by its implication, leaving ample room for my imagination, which had become my greatest tormentor. The story did not end with resolution, but with an unending nightmare. I am irrevocably changed, living in a perpetual state of fear and paranoia. The journal lies open before me, its pages a gaping maw into an abyss. I can no longer escape. I cannot discard it. A terrifying compulsion binds me to its words, to the entity it describes. I am trapped in a cycle of dread, my narrative voice fragmented, my psyche permanently scarred. The impossibility of preventing this mental disability, this descent into madness, is the true tragedy. The horror has become internalized, a part of me, a constant, intrusive thought that will never fade. The vampire, an ancient, enduring evil, had won. Its victory was not in a physical kill, but in the complete psychological domination of its unwitting reader. Some evils I now understand are too profound, too ancient to be truly overcome. Merely encountering them is enough to cause irreparable damage. The unresolved tension lingers, a profound anxiety that prolongs the terror far beyond the final page. The intimacy of this first-person account has dragged me, and perhaps you, into its depths. The journal, this story, is a contagion of fear, and now the horror is with us all.